Hello, for this section we will be looking at a historical overview of past emergencies that will give us some idea of why we want to have an emergency action plan and why we need to have a plan. Occupational Safety and Health Administration gives a definition of workplace emergency. It defines it as an unforeseen situation that threatens your employees, customers, or the public, disrupts or shuts down your operation, or causes physical or environmental damage. These emergencies may be natural or man-made. This is a very broad definition of workplace emergency, and as we go through the case studies that are in this PowerPoint, you will see different aspects of them. On the web page, I have listed various links to different sites to get more information on each one of these events. I've pulled out just a certain snippet of each event to show why we want to have an emergency action plan and why we want to have contingency plans for our personal use also. The first event I'd like to look at is the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. This is the largest tragic event in U.S. history. It occurred in 1911 in New York City in a high-rise building, and within 18 minutes 146 people were dead as a result of the fire. One of the biggest problems here was they could not exit the building. There was two staircases. One staircase was blocked. The other one was not used, was meeting its maximum capacity. The other aspect for emergency evacuation was the outside fire escape, and that was not in good repair and did not work as it should have worked at that time. So due to combustibles on the floor, the staircase being blocked, there was just too many people on the floor for everybody to get out at one time. Imperial Foods is another one. This one occurred in Hamlet, North Carolina in 1991. It was the worst tragedy that North Carolina had ever seen. And it also shaped the way that North Carolina OSHA and the Fire Marshal's Office did business. At this time period, neither organization had been in this facility. The biggest problem with this facility was that all the doors but one was locked or either blocked. The owner was afraid that people would steal his chicken McNuggets, so he wanted to make sure everybody came in one door and left by another. Fire broke out, 25 people died, and another 40 people were injured. This was a very tragic event for that community, not only for the people that were involved in this business, but also for those that lived in the surrounding areas. This is also an historical event in that this is the only instance where a criminal willful citation by OSHA was issued in North Carolina history, which means somebody went to jail for the deaths of the employees at this location. West Pharmaceuticals in Kinston, North Carolina, down east, in 2003 there was an explosion. The big thing about this particular event was they had a plan. They practiced their plan, they worked with the fire departments, the emergency management knew them. Being this was a small town, everybody at some point or another either worked at this facility or knew somebody that worked at this facility. But on the day of the explosion, the critical infrastructure went out. Water lines were busted, telephone lines were down, computer lines were down, power lines were down. Communication became a major issue. The only way that they had to communicate was via radios that volunteer firefighters on the scene that worked there were able to communicate with 911 and other officials. One of the biggest problems that they had here was accountability. All their records were blown up or was taken out of service. So they're sitting on the back of pickup trucks trying to figure out who was there and who wasn't. So you always want to make sure that you've got a backup plan of knowing where everybody is inside a location. The next one we'll look at is the station house fire in Rhode Island. Now, this is more of what we might consider a private place than a public place or a workplace, but there are people that do work here. But the biggest problem here was everybody coming in knew one way in and one way out. When the fire started, everybody tried to go back out the same way that they had come in, and that was the problem. Nobody used these other exits that were available. So on a personal note, when you go someplace, look and see where your exits are. Where else can you get out if you had to leave that facility? The next one we're going to look at is ConAgra in Garner, North Carolina. This was a plant explosion. 4 workers were killed. Another 67 were injured, including 3 firefighters. The biggest thing that happened here that could have been altered to some degree was, if you listen to the reports, everyone that spoke that morning talked about a smell of gas. Everybody smelled gas, but nothing was done to evacuate the plant or to consider what was going on. There were other citations that were issued, but self-preservation has to kick in at some point, and when you're smelling natural gas, something is wrong and you want to take appropriate actions for that. This particular explosion was directly responsible for an amendment to the National Fuel Gas Code prohibiting fuel gas piping systems in large buildings from being purged indoors. So you want to make sure that if you're not comfortable with something, that you let somebody else know and let them handle it. So lessons learned from these events and why we need emergency action plans and contingency plans for personal use also. Combustibles, always keep them away from the exits. Exits should never be blocked, whether they're blocked on the inside or the outside. If it's an exit, it should be able to open the door and walk right outside. Even the best of plans can go awry. Make sure you have a backup plan to your plan so that if for whatever reason you can't get your house keys or you can't get what you need, you have an alternative on getting that you can get home that evening. Also, make sure you know your exits. Where are they located at? No matter what building you're in or where you're at. If something was to block this exit, how am I going to get out of here? And then self-preservation for one's own safety. Make sure that you're taking responsibility for yourself, and if something doesn't feel right, let the person in charge know. As we go through this program, we will look at different ways of working with fire, medical emergencies, and weather emergencies, and who you need to contact. Also, take a look at those case studies that I brought up. See what else was involved. There's a lot more involved than just the little snippets that I brought out for this particular section.